Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I am so thrilled today to have a fellow Midwesterner, Caleb Roche, on the show today. Caleb, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's always great to talk to someone from the Midwest.
Yes, absolutely. So I would love for you to dive into your background a little bit and why you decided to get into marketing and data analytics. You were one of the youngest people, right, to get into your university and then get into your MBA program, graduate. So it seems like you were very driven from an early age.
Yeah, I was. So I started a dog walking service. I always like to tell people, you know how everyone has their story of like, this is how I made $1 million at 19. And like, I don't have any of those cool stories, but I started a dog walking service when I was like 12 and I made like some good money. And that's always my go-to like driven entrepreneur story is like, I made business cards and it was pretty well designed. Wow. So pretty pumped. But so I went to college thinking I wanted to be a lawyer. So I did some internships on the law side previous to college and during college and realized very quickly that it was not the thing that I wanted to go into. And I had kind of set up a back pedal that I could have that I went for a marketing degree because I always thought marketing was cool. And so it ended up being that I fell in love with marketing. And as you know, on the marketing side, there's a lot to marketing, not just running ads or building websites or creating cool TV ads. And so I learned very quickly that there's this consumer behavior piece of it and all that runs into it. And so I ended up graduating college around 20. So I was one of the youngest graduated students and admitted for full time. And then I ended up going and getting my master's degree from West Texas A&M and was one of the youngest admitted and graduated students there. So that was a pretty cool thing and pretty exciting. And so kind of have taken the educational piece to where, especially being young, I'm 24 right now. I had to think about that. As a marketing consultant that owns a marketing practice and has a couple employees, we always try to make sure that people see the valid point of it. I'm not just some young person that thinks they know how to do marketing. I've got the educational piece as well. So that's where we've really grown and we serve a majority of clients across the United States, ranging in revenues and size and everything. And so our big focus is just making sure that companies know how to market better and take more of a strategic approach, not just kind of a shotgun approach.
Yeah, that is so important. So many companies just see what's the shiny new toy, right? Whether it's ChatGPT or a new social media platform. And they're like, okay, I have to learn all about that. And then I feel like a lot of times they buy courses or they get people who say, oh, I can do this and that for you, but they're not learning the fundamentals themselves and really getting that explanation of how to actually craft using data analytics and storytelling to reach the right audience. So I applaud you. And you know what? Age is irrelevant these days. My director of operations just graduated from college, had just graduated from high school. Wow. She just has that brain. And so I love that you're out there, you're doing what you love, you know what you're doing, and you've been able to build a business at the age of 24. So kudos.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a journey, as you know, but it takes time.
Yeah. So let's talk about marketing and communications. I mean, even in the years that you've been involved in the industry, things have changed so quickly.
I know. Well, and that's the thing, you know, we were talking before this about all the changes and I mean, even algorithm changes, analytic changes, tracking changes, and, you know, with all the accessibility of data, it's been kind of a whirlwind. I don't know if you felt that way, but over the past 5 years, it feels like we got access to so many things as marketers, especially in our tool chest. And then it almost feels like part of them were taken away. Like we had to find different ways to move around them. And so it's been kind of the whirlwind or roller coaster the past 5 years is how do we make these changes adapt and how do we make better marketing strategies based on this? I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've heard some stuff about Facebook and Google having some layoffs. And so I know like support channels really tough for agencies right now. And so it's a really interesting world that we're in on the marketing side because it feels like performance is dropping on Facebook. And so there's all these different things that are rolling around that it's like, what is going on? What's happening?
Yeah, I actually teach for the Digital Media Management Master's program at USC Annenberg, and I teach digital advertising and analytics. So spring semester, that's when people really realize, oh, AI is here. We've been using it all along. We just didn't realize it. Or we've been using machine learning. Now we have these other tools. Are they going to take jobs? What's that landscape going to be like? I've already started the summer term and the conversations are even a little bit different. Like the fines that Meta, they just got $1.3 billion fine in Europe for privacy. The privacy laws are changing. Third-party cookies are going away next year. So many things month to month. And if you don't keep on top of these trends, then we can't advise our clients on how best to use these tools and how we're going to use them for them, right?
Absolutely. AI, machine learning have been around before. And I think that's where we're trying to help our clients shift their mindset of it's not just about AI, it's about machine learning. I think that's the big piece is we're not trying to build AI models. We're trying to build machine learning models.
Exactly.
We're using AI to build machine learning. And my best example is I worked with a company called Inspire Brands for a couple of years, and they run basically one of the largest private QSR restaurant chains. So they own Sonic, Jimmy John's, Buffalo Wild Wings.
Wow.
And what's interesting was when, can't go into too many specifics, but a couple of years ago, they had data science teams that were looking at machine learning, how to utilize that in the business. And so I think what's interesting is I think we see these big businesses and now the smaller mid-sized businesses are coming around to it, but we're finally learning how to utilize machine learning, but it's been around for so long and it's just utilizing data models in a different way. So that's been what's fascinating about AI and ChatGPT specifically is with the rise of this, it's been around, but how do we use that to empower businesses,
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in terms of the way that you like to work with clients on their campaigns and the different tools that you use? Because I know like different social media platforms are always coming out, kind of have to test and see, okay, is that relevant? Is that not? A lot of people are leaving Twitter, which was huge for a lot of brands. Yeah.
So what we've seen, one of the things that we're advising our clients and kind of encouraging them to do is build paid channels. Like, obviously the overall goal, and you probably teach this in your classes as well, is we're trying to build organic paid channels. So we're trying to own all of the channels that we do. But when it comes to Reddit, when it comes to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you still have to own those paid channels as well. And so one of the things that we're advising is find that niche where your loyal supporters are going to be and start building that community around. And I know that's a trendy buzzword, but it's really been interesting to watch. You see, we have some technology businesses, and what's interesting is you'll find more of those people on Reddit than anything else.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing is they're trying to do organic and paid on Reddit versus a consumer brand skincare line is probably not going to be on Reddit as much. And that's going to be more. So with all the changes, we're trying to advise everyone as a business owner, whether you're a big corporation or a small corporation, and obviously big corporations are better at this, they need to figure out better ways to own their data and better ways to farm their data. It's the typical, you need a CRM and you need email lists and you need as much information about your customers. But I think what we've seen in the past recently that's been really powerful is understanding user behavior by per person and what their purchase behavior looks like internally. So someone that's purchased 65 times at average lifetime value of $10,000 versus someone that has 3 orders at an average lifetime value of $50. What are the actions that they're taking and what's driving them to take those actions? And how do we retain those 65 order customers while using the non-loyalists that purchase maybe a couple of times? How do we increase purchasing behavior? It's not as much about the Facebook algorithm changes or the Apple changes where we can't do third-party tracking, but that's where we've seen so many changes that it's like, we're kind of gun shy of we need to make sure that when we're building all these marketing channels, that we find ways to build our own audiences from those channels. So how can we pull people from Reddit into a newsletter that's weekly, that then we get information about usability. We have their email list. We might get their phone number, how many times they come to the site. And so all of the data tracking that we can do internally without having to rely on tools is really helpful, is what we've seen.
Let's talk a little bit more about Reddit. A few years ago, I had a great situation where there's an unknown singer-songwriter who released a Christmas song called Lonely Christmas. And I posted it in some different groups as part of the campaign strategy, like neighborhood groups and things like that. Oh, here's a song that's very heartwarming. And one of the people who was one of the groups was a huge Reddit person. He's like, hey, I want to push this up on Reddit. So through the power of organic, he helped push us to over 100,000 views on YouTube in the first 3 days. No advertising yet, right? So it was really amazing. And I feel like the Reddit user is very much about authenticity, maybe even more so than, because I think people on TikTok or Meta or other platforms are used to seeing and being inundated with advertising that speaks to them. Yeah. So I bet that Reddit is not something that's in most people's scope when they're thinking about how are they going to push out their content to the right audience. So can you give us some insight into, a little bit more about Reddit, how people can use it and all of that?
Oh, absolutely. So just like Meta, just like LinkedIn, everyone, they have their own internal advertising tool, which is neat. And so you can end up rolling out paid advertising. And what's really fascinating about the way that they've done advertising on Reddit is, I don't know how frequent you are on Reddit, but when you're looking at these communities, you can run through suggested, or you can go right to your, obviously, like your communities. And so what's interesting is they've embedded these ads to look like communities. And so it has the paid side, so you know it's sponsored. So there is obviously truth in advertising there, but it kind of flows a little bit better, and it doesn't hit like a meta where you can know that it's an ad, or you can obviously tell. And so it's very text heavy ads, which is kind of interesting as well.
Yeah.
But you drive people to communities, and you can use them for driving to communities, driving to websites, taking action. And so it's really fascinating because from a paid perspective, they've got their paid advertising manager, and conversions, clicks, cost per thousand impressions are all very cheap compared to other channels. And so again, you have the debate between how much information does Reddit have on users versus Meta. Probably not as much information, but they are improving their models. And so it's kind of like the Facebook from the, I don't even know what year to put it at, but like, let's say like '08, when you could run a Facebook ad and you get them for like 50 cents. Real estate agents could get like, clients for 50 cents on Facebook because no one else is doing it. So it almost feels slightly like that. And then the other piece that's nice about Reddit is it's all community based. And so if you can start leveraging into getting loyal customers to push into different channels on Reddit and make it seem organic without any paid engagement, it can actually, like you said, really make some movements on getting people to be brand loyalists, commenting, talking about new features, getting them bought in. So then not only are you building the channel, let's say we built a channel around our company, but then going on the relevant channels and pushing out, hey, you need to check out this channel, or hey, you need to check out this Reddit topic, and then driving them to that topic, which is really interesting as well.
Wow. Yeah, that is fascinating. So for everybody listening, Reddit could be your next untapped market.
It might be the next untapped market right there.
Yeah. I have friends, to your point, at Meta, at Twitter, who at Salesforce, who've been laid off recently, who were in that taxonomy or, an advertising arena. So it's interesting because I feel like they all want advertising, but they don't want to pay to have the staff that we need that helps manage the algorithm and helps push people to the right experience. And it sounds like Reddit is making a little bit more of an investment or a different investment and seeing that they have an opportunity to come in and take some of that market share.
Well, and I think what's interesting, I'm not for sure if you're familiar with like the Meta Business Leaders Network, or obviously like there's the Facebook or the Meta Business Partners. What's interesting was from our conversations with individuals at Meta and those that have been laid off, it seems like the larger tech companies are pulling away from their advertising support channels and their business partnerships. They were really focusing in on how do we build communities? And there's really not, like they've kind of pulled that back. And so it's interesting to see what that's going to do for Facebook, for Meta, for Twitter, all of those different channels. And so that's why I think it's everly increasingly important to make sure that the channels that you're focusing on are owned, because no matter what happens, I don't know if you remember the Facebook outage. I don't even know if it was a year ago, 2 years ago. I can't remember, but I remember it was down for a little bit. And so the one thing that we always tell our clients is all of these channels like Twitter, like Facebook, you don't own them. And so you might spend thousands of dollars advertising, and you might make the perfect profile. You might have all these social posts, and it's great. But what happens the day, and we probably know it won't happen with Facebook, but what if like Facebook got shut down by the government? Or what if they went bankrupt and they couldn't operate anymore? I mean, these are things that are very unlikely to happen because it's such a large scale, but it's something to think about, especially on the outage. What if you only made sales based on your Facebook profile?
Exactly.
And now no one knows, you don't have a website, you don't have an email list. So now you can't communicate with your customers. Hey, so-and-so boutique is closing today for, at 5:00. No one really knows. And so that's why diversification is really good. But again, having your own channels like CRMs and email channels and everything like that are so essential to individuals.
Yeah. You're preaching to the choir. I always talk about this. I love thinking about integrated marketing, but also thinking about what's paid, earned, shared, and owned. And the only thing we really have control over is what we own. So to that point, lead gen and sales, I know there are many times I'll see an ad and I'll click on it to get more information, and they put me into their funnel, or they put me onto their email list and their text message list, and I'm not ready to convert to a buyer. I just want to do my research and get more information. So it almost pushes me away. And even as a marketer, I know what they're doing. I know how many touch points it takes to get that sale, but it's pushing me away from wanting to purchase and convert, which is going to hurt the companies because they need that first party data so that they can continue to build their lists. So talk about lead gen sales. How do we navigate that in the current environment? And then how do smaller companies maybe don't have a huge email list or customer base yet? If everything else went away, how are they going to grow their audiences? So I know it's a couple questions there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to answer your first question, how do we adapt these sales and strategies to basically be a little bit more less off-putting of like right away, like, hey, thanks for joining our email list. Here's 35 text messages about sales that we're having. And I think the important part is we always say it's better to start something and learn. So, obviously, like sometimes you can go the wrong way and you can kind of alienate yourself. But at the same time, one of the things that we always see that's good is let's start small and let's like start warming them up. It's your most common marketing trend. Let's warm up the audience. And so let's find ways to learn information about them. They join a text club and it's like, hey, join our text club, get exclusive offers, whatever, and send them some sort of discount, 5-10% off just for joining or some points if you have a loyalty program, and leave that person alone for just a little bit and start learning a little bit more information. And I've seen a couple companies utilize this really well. Hey, we want to give you a free coffee on your birthday, or we want to provide you a birthday reward. So you start learning like, hey, just text us back with your birthday. So the more relevant information that they can get to gather demographic data to where, let's say you start with the phone number, you get their email address, you offer them a coupon, you're paying for that data essentially with the coupon. Then we're getting the birthday. Well, then if we can start identifying their age and maybe like household members, anyone connected, we can start sending them text messages. Let's say a mom in their 30s versus a college student in their 25, 22 that's a male, their purchasing behavior is going to be much different.
Right.
So maybe we start sending out female clothes to the female, or starting to kind of make assumptions around different demographics and learn what makes better decisions. And so that's where you can start kind of hitting them with some small things like targeted offers to see where they bite and where they don't on a very small scale, to where now you've used 10 people to test this. Now you can roll this out to 1,000 different people. Nice. So on that side of things, I think that's really important to start testing and understanding what information is really relevant, because that's kind of we're in a data age. The oil and gas, the analogy, data is more valuable than oil. Everyone uses that term, but it's also a blessing and a curse, because it's like oil. Like if you have too much, you're going to have some problems. And so again, with data, what information are you collecting? Is it useful to your business? If I know that you have 3 kids, is that good? And learning what data is important and what isn't is going to be a big piece.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I think goes back to a lot of companies also say they're for everyone. They don't build out their customer personas from the start. So they don't have those profiles built to know who they want to target. So that when they get that customer information, they can see, are we targeting who we thought we were targeting? Or are other people really coming in for our product or service? And do we need to retool that? So I love what you just said.
Absolutely. And then I think on the piece of how do you build, email lists, or how do you build audiences, I think that's where you have to start identifying where is your audience and what's the best strategy. And so, personal example, I started a podcast, and I've wanted to start a podcast for a while. But for me, it was one of those things that I've identified. This is a really great way to build build yourself as a subject matter expert. And you have to think about, do you monetize it? Do you not? And you have to identify your goal of, okay, is this a way for me to build an email list? Is it a way for me to build me being the subject matter expert? And so I think there's some really creative ways that people can do that, where it's running, let's say, paid ads from a Facebook campaign to a landing page on their website. That's just an article about something. And it's like, hey, sign up here to learn more about our weekly newsletter, our monthly newsletter. And finding really creative ways to drive traffic to different locations where you can get a sign up or an opt-in. I think that's a really important piece. And so again, it just kind of relates, in my opinion, back to there. But I'd love, what do you think about that side of things?
I think that you hit the nail on the head. So that's one of the things I love about podcasting, and it's becoming an ever more important part of strategy for so many companies on the PR side as well. It's evergreen content. While people think there are an overwhelming number of podcasts, the percentage of active podcasts is actually very low. I think on Apple, 18% of the podcasts that you see on there are active, which means they've published an episode in the last 3 months. So, because I know I've hosted 2 podcasts for clients who've both stopped the podcasts, but they're still paying a fee to be hosted and have their name out there in the podcast landscape, right? It really helps build up, your thought leadership, your authority, SEO value. I was able to get the .com for my company because of the podcast, because of my consistency. Somebody else had the .com and they were in a different country. I have the trademark, but only for the US. So, it was this whole dance. And then finally one day, I think they just gave up because they were no longer on Google page 1. So it builds a lot. I also meet amazing people who either I can refer business to or they can refer business to me. And then you have so much content. And so it can really help you play into, you can take a great episode and share it out, and you can do it via your blog, your newsletter, your website, all the different ways you can listen to the podcast, as well as if it's a really high performing episode or it's an episode you want to boost up the performance a little bit because there's great content people just haven't found yet, then you can do some paid advertising around it. So there's so many ways to use the content that you get. So congratulations. What is your podcast called?
Club Conversations, a marketing podcast. And so that's where, we're trying, the thought process behind it is, so we've rebranded from Roche Consulting, which was my name, obviously first and last name, to where now we have employees. So it's like, hey, this is kind of a bigger thing. So we rebranded a love of golf with consulting. And so our company name is now called Club Creative. So our idea behind it is we're trying to build our own channels. We have some off-channel sites for like some local, we have like the smallbusinesslist.com, and we have a couple other sites like that start driving traffic in around these generic terms that they don't know are connected. And so we have Club Creative, which is our virtual country club, and it's our marketing consulting firm. Well, now Club Conversations has stemmed from that. So we're having the conversations in the virtual country club Conversations. So we're trying to build people around all these different like audiences and very niche product, but that's kind of what we're focusing on.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, I love that. What is one of the biggest surprises that you found when you decided to start your own business? Like, were you always going to start your own business, or did you want to work for an agency or, in-house first, or how did that happen?
I grew up in a very structured household where it was kind of like, hey, money and security is very important. And so, as you know, with the business ownership side, it's kind of a little opposite. Right. And so I grew up thinking like, okay, well, I've always been an entrepreneur in my mind, and I've always wanted to look at real estate investing or, all the ways that you can make, let's say, passive income, active income, whatever that is. And so I always knew I wanted to go into business ownership, but I kept telling myself, well, when I have like $250,000 saved up, I'll start my business and it'll be fine. And I started working for some companies and realized very quickly, like, I am not a good employee. Like I will work 80 hours a week, but I don't like being told like 8 a.m. you have to be here. And one of the biggest realizations was when me and my wife had our first child, doctor appointments, getting time off to go to doctor's appointments. I mean, as a dad, it was like, you're going to the doctor's appointment? Why? And so, it's kind of interesting. And so getting time off for that was tough. And I was always getting around meetings. And so very quickly I learned, I want to build something for me and my family and not be stuck to something else. And so that's where I've always wanted to, but I didn't realize it was possible. And I didn't know the challenges that came with it, but we've adapted and learned from very quickly. And so that's been the biggest piece of that.
Wow. Fantastic. Could not agree more. Definitely flexibility is one of my key markers because I'll work all weekend. I'll do whatever I need to do, but I need to be able to make breakfast for my daughter in the morning, take her to school, pick her up from school, talk about her day, get her to her activities. I'm fine going back and working a little bit more later in the evening when she's doing her homework or gone to bed, but I'm not going to take away that precious time that I have with her because that time is limited. It goes so fast.
Oh, absolutely. At the end of the day, I think that's one of the things that you learn as a business owner is time is so important, but at the same time, you can never get that time back as well. And so, how are you spending efficient relationships? How are you being more productive? How are you taking time? And it's kind of like, building a community. You can do all of these different types of things, but what are they really contributing to and how are they relating to the overall mission? And is it really efficient doing those things or not?
That question right there is something everybody should think about when they're looking at how they're using marketing, right? Because not everything is for everybody. And if you really focus on your ideal market segments and where they're living and breathing, then you're going to do so much better than trying to just throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
Oh, absolutely. Such a big thing.
Yeah. So what is one of the most surprising things that you learned when you did start your business? Was it easier or harder for you when you started? Did it just all of a sudden you just had all these clients and it was fantastic?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a millionaire first day. I woke up and $1 million hit my account. So it worked really well. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but business is super easy. No, so I've realized over the years that I think you're going to continue having challenges, but they're just going to continue getting bigger if you want to continue growing. And so that's kind of one thing that I've learned is you start and you're your only employee, let's say. And so you're just like, any time that you need money, you're like, okay, well, I just need to make sure I have enough in the account that I can pay myself. That's the most basic form of thinking, but it's like, you're not worried about, well, if we have a bad month, I can eat ramen noodles for a little bit, or, I can not drive for a little bit and not have gas money, those different types of things. And as you grow and scale it, you realize very quickly, like when we hired our first employee, I thought that was going to be the hardest thing, like, how do I hire an employee? And you do the numbers and you get nervous. And then first time payroll comes out, you're like, okay, I got to make sure I've got this in here and I've got to make sure I've rent my reserves.
Yeah.
And so, well, then you get to the next person and you're like, okay, well, that one person was easy. Like, this is easy. Now the second person, and you slowly grow and it feels like this burden that you have to get over. But after a month or two, it just feels normal. And so I think that side of things has been a really interesting adjustment. And same thing on letting people go. It's that first time that you have to let someone go, that you're nervous, you get scared. And then you do it, you're like, okay, well, that wasn't as bad as it happened, as it needed to take place. So one of the things that I've learned is I've gotten so anxious over these things that really I shouldn't have, but I've let myself balloon into this like big thing that really wasn't a big thing. And being young, you deal with imposter syndrome. And that's where I feel like some of these conversations that we have with clients, I go in and we put all this work into it and you hope that they value it. And sometimes you have clients that really value it and sometimes you don't. So you go into these conversations not knowing, is the client going to love this or hate it? And sometimes it's very nerve-wracking.
That is very true. Oh gosh, a lot of the same things. I've had a few different businesses and I think I kind of am heart-centered. So I go into it with that and not always thinking about the business implications. So it's something I've definitely shifted over time. And then going back to your thing about, doesn't matter what age you are, you get that fear, that imposter syndrome at some points. Because for myself, I was not working in marketing and PR per se. I was still doing things in marketing and PR, like kind of under the table for friends and like helping them out with their businesses or for my own stuff. Have an agency for a while and then went through divorce and had to go back into the workforce and felt like I had to prove myself all over again. So it's really interesting. And I think one of my only options was really being an entrepreneur because there are very few companies that will appreciate the skills that I built up from my volunteer work or being a mom and all the organization that I had to put into being head of the PTO or being on the board of the school or whatever it was, right? I think now it's shifted a little bit where there are people who really appreciate that, but then there are a lot of people who still want to put you in a box and they only want you to be an expert at one thing. And I don't think that's the world we live in nowadays. Things are changing so fast. We don't have to be the expert at everything, but we have to know enough about things that we can also hire the right people who are the expert for us. The other thing I've been seeing recently is particularly in a lot of Facebook groups, because I feel like sometimes when I go on Facebook just to like see what my friends are doing, all I see are the groups that I'm in. Sometimes I'll see friends, but then a lot of times, it's just the groups. We're a global economy now. So there are really highly skilled people in many other countries besides the US who can do parts of digital work. My podcast editor, for instance, is in the Philippines and he's amazing. And since I self-fund it, I'm not doing it for money right now. I'm doing it because I really love getting other people out there and having these conversations like the one we're having. But I'm able to help him and his family by hiring him for what is a fair wage where he lives. But sometimes I see these conversations happen between overseas contractors and people based in the US. The people based in the US are like, oh, you're really underpaid and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, actually, that's a living wage where they are. That actually is very fair. That's not paying them minimum wage in their country, right? That is elevated. And so I think shifting people's mindsets and seeing really living in this world that's virtual and we can hire the best people for the best job at the best time. And, so those are some of the things that I've been seeing a lot about like recently.
Yeah. Well, I think even salaries in general in the US is tough now because it's like with the way the inflation has moved, with the cost of living, I mean, how do you as a business stay agile and move with that and make sure that what is a fair wage for employees? I mean, that's the big question.
It really is.
It's really tough.
Well, and then all the things that employees don't understand go into, it's not just what they get in their paycheck. We have to put a lot aside for taxes, for unemployment, for all of these other things, so it's actually a lot more expensive. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're paying people fairly and that we're really respecting them and the value that they're bringing to our companies.
Oh, absolutely. The joys.
Yeah. So what are some of the big changes that you see? We've talked about some of them, but what are the one or two things that people should keep top of mind going into the rest of 2023 and then going into 2024 and 2025?
Yeah. So I think two of the biggest pieces I think that are going to happen / making changes / happening now for 2023 is going to be the switch from GA Universal Analytics to Google Analytics for GA4. I think that's one of the biggest shifts. And then additionally, I think Google just rolled out their new search experience. I don't know the exact term because it's newer, but they're rolling that out and they're having some issues recently. I don't know if
Ooh.
you guys do SEO, but there was a moment this week where we look at Search Console every day for our clients and it hadn't refreshed for 66 hours.
Ooh,
and so there was
tough.
a big bug. And so talking about, but I think they're making some really big changes. Pages are not being crawled as quickly. And so on both a Google Analytics piece and Search Console, I think the way that AI is moving, I think Bing, all of that, I think there's going to be a lot of different changes that we see rolled out over the next year, especially within organic search and just reporting from Google Analytics. And so one of the things that we are learning with Google Analytics for is there are some really big discrepancies between Universal Analytics data and Google Analytics 4 data. And so the way that things are being reported, the way that traffic's being reported, the way that you can track it, it's really different. And so we actually had a client that had significantly different numbers when we were analyzing the switch from UA to GA4 over the past 6 months, traffic being reported completely different. And they're claiming that GA4 is reporting a lot better. So what's going to be interesting, especially for client sites, is from a UA standpoint where maybe they're seeing 300 website visitors, that might only be 250 to 200. And so there's a lot of discrepancies on how they classify things. And so what's going to be interesting, and I think people should look out for over the next 6 months, is what does this do for my website? What does website traffic look like? And data might be completely off because the way that they're classifying engagement time versus just like page time is significantly different. So if you look at UA, it might say that they've been on the page for 2 minutes, but average page time on GA4 might be 45 seconds. So it might be off by a minute to 2 minutes, which can completely change the way that you view your content on your website.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then thinking about the sales cycle and the attribution models and how are you going to count where people enter and exit
and so that's the other thing. So we've been playing around with a lot of the conversion data and kind of, how on Google Analytics, UA used to be able to go in and track basically their tree map or page map. We used to call it a couple different things, but essentially you could say, okay, someone came on the homepage, 35% of the users, 35 of them went here, they went there, the next step. And so the problem with GA4 is they've gotten a lot more robust on the reporting side, but it's more of a raw data feel. And so it's not as user friendly around like, okay, you can click this and it shows you. Like you actually have to go in and build your customer report. And now they have like tables with segments and ways that you can classify data. So you can get a lot more enriched data. But from a user standpoint, from like a small business owner or a mid-sized business owner, they're going to have to hire someone unless they can interpret what those data points mean. So that's the unfortunate part is a lot of companies, I think, are going to be turned away from Google Analytics because usability is not going to be as easy as it used to be.
Interesting. Yeah, I also feel like there's going to be like data compliance officers with all the privacy laws changing and coming. There are 3 states now that have similar laws to the GDPR. And it's something that I think a lot of people also aren't aware of. How are you monitoring privacy? Are you being upfront?
Privacy and accessibility is a huge thing. We're seeing a lot of companies want to use better privacy policies. So I think that's been something that's been kind of overlooked in the past couple of years is privacy policies and terms and conditions. A lot of small business owners, I mean, we've even seen it when we first started, using cookie cutter terms and service agreements. And what we're realizing is there's a lot of legal implications to that. And so you have to be very concerned about what you actually put on those. You need to be very upfront about what you're tracking, how you're tracking it, because it's becoming a bigger thing. So what we're advising our clients on privacy policies, terms of services, make sure that you hire someone. Like lawyers actually do that, which I know we all don't want to pay lawyers, but it's a case because it really prevents you. The other thing is on accessibility. With the ADA, there are a lot, and I think in California, it's becoming a very popular thing where lawsuits are happening where these companies will have these individuals that have ADA disabilities will actually go on websites. The website's not optimized for that, and they'll actually provide lawsuits. And so you can be sued, and whether it stands or not has kind of been a big topic because how do you prove this? And what are the actual, how much can you actually pay out? So there's a lot of, I guess, scaredness around that, and we don't know what's going to happen. But there's a lot of companies out there that actually have plugins that allow for you to have ADA compliant sites. One of them that we've actually realized recently, I have it on my board, is Accessiby. That's a code solution you can plug into your website, and it actually adds, there's a thing at the bottom. And so it's ADA compliant.
Oh, cool.
And it's $50 a month. And so for some businesses, that's a lot. Most businesses, to make sure that you don't get sued, it can be one of those things. And so on accessibility, privacy, I think full transparency on how you're using client data and what you're doing with it is huge for a business, because the more that we can educate our consumers and say, here's exactly what we're doing with your data. We're not going to sell it to a farm. We're not going to spam you, but we're going to use this to make sure your experience is to the best of our ability. Yeah. I think that's shaping that as a company is huge from data and privacy. Is we're not trying to be, there's all the speculation around TikTok and what it's trying to doing with it. I don't think a lot of companies in the corporate setting are saying, well, how do we know, like, how do we get into their camera at home and how do we learn what they're doing so we can make their lives better? I think what a lot of companies are doing is we're looking at how do we build better experiences for our customers and people that use our product, and how do we make their lives better? And from a marketing perspective, that's what I think a lot of companies have to shift to and educate their consumers about.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. I love it when we can just go back and forth and talk about all these different things that are happening. I really appreciate it. Caleb, how can people find you if they want to learn more about working with you?
My favorite thing is LinkedIn right now. So they can find me, Caleb Roche, MBA on LinkedIn. Nice. Founder of Club Creative. So feel free to connect with me and would love to connect with people and chat with them. So best way is either that or goclubcreative.com is our website. You can schedule a consultation and we can talk more if you're interested.
Fantastic. And do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, family motto, words that you live by?
Oh, there's a lot of those. So I believe I'm going to have to pull this one out. So in lieu of our new podcast, we've started this new thing where we're trying to relate, obviously, and it's going to alienate me a little bit, but golf terms with marketing and kind of ways to optimize. So I know not as many people are big golf fans, but I think one of the interesting pieces that we related recently was much like perfecting your golf swing requires attention to various elements, the grip, the stance, the backswing. Mastering search engine optimization, mastering marketing involves a multitude of factors. Both are making consistent small adjustments and practicing consistently to drive best results. In both golf and marketing, there's always room for improvement, and success comes to those who are adapting their strategy and techniques to meet changing conditions.
Okay.
So
there you have it. Awesome.
Well, we'll see if anyone gets that.
Thank you so much, Caleb. This has been a great conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Happy to have done so. And thank you to the audience for listening to another amazing expert speaker. All things data analytics, a lot for you to be thinking about as things are changing. But the concepts that Caleb was talking about are things that won't change. So think about those. Think about where your audience really is living. Think about the best way to reach them and try to get them into your first party funnel as quickly as possible, because those third party cookies are going away. Who knows how we're going to be able to serve ads to people who aren't already our audience. So with that, I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.